Okay, we'll start with this. Last night in Las Vegas, newly crowned WBO featherweight champion Rafael Espinoza of Mexico made his first successful defense of his newly obtained WBO title. The WBO title he pried away from then champion and standout amateur Rotisserie Ramirez
of Cuba.
He defended it yesterday against his countryman Sergio Chirino Sanchez, who he walked down and stopped in 4 rounds.
Almost immediately you can see that Rafael Espinoza towers over most other featherweights in the division. There are only a couple of guys, a handful of guys that you can count on one hand as big as Rafael Espinoza campaigning at this weight.
You're talking about a 126-pounder that stands in at approximately 6'1", physically imposing size and devastating power. That's what Rafael Espinoza put on display yesterday. Every so often, Sergio got in with a shot, but Sergio's punches did not have the effect on Rafael that Rafael's punches had on Sergio.
Rafael can crack.
With good reason. Look at how big he is. If you're going to be that much bigger than everybody, the least you can do is get the guy the heck out of there. And he did yesterday in about 4 rounds, walking down and stalking, stopping Chirino Sanchez.
Watching his fight.
And the physically imposing size of Rafael Espinoza, the guy who I had in mind is the guy who doesn't even campaign at this weight yet. I'm talking about 4-division, 2-time undisputed champion Naoya Inoue, and what is waiting for him up there at 126 when he moves up there next year, if everything goes to plan this one. Almost every fight that he's in is going to be a David and Goliath situation, whether you're talking about a fight with WBC champion Ray Vargas or a fight with WBO champion Rafael Espinoza.
He's going to be noticeably smaller than all of the reigning champions at this weight, save Nick Ball.
There are 4, count them, 4 reigning champions at 126 pounds. IBF champion Luis Lopez, WBC champion Ray Vargas, WBO champion Rafael Espinoza, who we just talked about, and WBA champion, newly crowned Nick Ball.
He's not the tallest fighter, but he's very strong.
Noticeably shorter and stumpier than all the other reigning champions at this weight, but as stated, Nick is physically strong. And we saw that in the Ray Vargas fight, we saw that in the Ray Savage fight. Several conversations I've had on several live streams as to what the future holds for Naoya Inoue, and how I don't see him leaving this sport an unbeaten fighter. So many boxers,
very, very small portion of them leave the sport and cap off their careers unbeaten.
There are very few fairy tale endings and even fewer unblemished records in the sport of boxing at a fighter's career's end.
When it's over.
And there's no shame in that. There's no shame in losing 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4, however many losses a fighter might suffer throughout their career. There's no shame in it so long as you manage to accomplish something that cannot be undone. And in that way, Inoue's already done that.
There are very few fighters that see themselves become undisputed champions in possession of all the belts, and even fewer that do it 2 times.
Even fewer that are 4-division champions, 4-weight champions like Naoya Inoue. So in many ways, he already has a Hall of Fame career, Hall of Fame worthy, that when he retires, he's going in the Hall.
In the distant future.
But in the not-so-distant future, when you survey the landscape at 126 pounds, the featherweight division that he means to move up to in the coming year, it's not looking good. I mean, just a lot of those guys are physically imposing, hard-punching guys.
3 of the 4 champions right now hail from Mexico at the lower weights.
You often hear about the Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry, but at the lower weights, it's more of a Mexico versus Japan rivalry.
Down there.
And when you think about how 3 of the 4 champions at featherweight all hail from Mexico, and all of them would like to pay back Naoya Inoue for what he did to their countryman, Luis Neri.
Tough fights ahead.
When you think about the champions at featherweight, not just the champions, but the challengers, guys like Angelo Leo of the United States and Roman Villa.
Rotisserie Ramirez of Cuba, standout amateur, Olympian.
I'm a big fan of Naoya Inoue, but I don't have any illusions about what might happen to him up there at 126 pounds when the time comes. I think at that weight, he would have hit a ceiling. And I don't know that his boxing, just his nuts and bolts boxing, is going to be enough to get through fights with guys this size.
That's what resonated with me the most yesterday watching Rafael Espinoza in action, that this guy's huge for 126, and he's not the only one. Ray Vargas, Brandon Figueroa.
Very big guys too, very big, and some stronger than others at 126 pounds. For a guy like Inoue, who's already moved up 3 times and he's been a champion at 4 weights, you lose something the higher you go.
The higher you climb.
Might have been able to land with authority at 122 and stop guys, but will you still be able to do that at 126? He's got to tread carefully.
He should.
I look at that division and I look at him and I tell myself, he should not be in a hurry to move up to 126. He shouldn't. He should stick around 122 a while longer, really acclimate to that weight because he hasn't even been there all that long.
A little under a year and just 3 fights. The Fulton fight, the Tapales fight, and the more recent Luis Neri fight.
He's got this upcoming TJ Doheny fight in September. Then afterwards, Australia's own Sam Goodman
Might fight 3 times this calendar year.
at 122, and they are already talking about charting a course to 126. Personally, I think they should pump the brakes, but that's the thing about Inoue. You don't accomplish as much as he's accomplished by being cautious and being careful and nervous. It's the brave fighters that sometimes suffer a loss first, not the careful ones.
In pursuit of legacy and biting off more than they can chew.
Just in keeping with the theme of news at or around these weights, Eddie Hearn says to Inoue, "You are afraid." He slams Inoue's next fight and says Top Rank is scared. In a recent interview, Eddie Hearn discusses word that Inoue's next fight will be TJ Doheny, as previously speculated, and criticizes the Japanese sensation's team for ducking the fight with MJ Akhmadaliev. Despite recent speculation that Inoue, who is coming off a dominant string of victories over Luis Neri, Stephen Fulton, and Marlon Tapales, with prior dominant victories over the likes of Nonito Donaire, was to fight in Wembley in September, it has instead been confirmed by Bob Arum that a fight against TJ Doheny in Tokyo is the more likely bout in September.
Same month as the Wembley show.
MJ Akhmadaliev is Inoue's WBA mandatory challenger, and so Eddie Hearn had some choice words about why Top Rank are opting for Doheny instead of the Uzbek boxer. In the interview, Hearn says of Inoue's next fight, "Unfortunately, it's a terrible mismatch." He goes on to say of Inoue and his team, "I know for a fact that the team do not want to fight Akmadaliev. They're concerned about that fight, so all this monster thing, this is my message to Mr. Honda, to the entire team, to Bob Arum. The only real fight out there for you is Akmadaliev."
Is that the way it is?
From where I'm sitting, MJ can give Inoue a better fight than TJ Doheny, certainly better than TJ, and better than Sam Goodman. However, I don't think they're scared. I don't think they're afraid of putting Inoue in that fight. What I think happened is shortly after Inoue beat Luis Neri, they entered right into negotiations with TJ Doheny, who's been boxing in Japan for his last 3 fights, and he's developed a cult following.
I don't think they're scared.
What I think happened, they were able to make the TJ Doheny fight in a jiffy before the WBA's order actually came down for the MJ fight. So by the time that order comes down, they don't want to go back on their plans. They don't want to start a new set of negotiations.
Bob least of all for a matchroom fighter? You think he wants to do a matchroom fighter any favors?
But Eddie Hearn says they're scared and they don't want no parts of MJ. He says, "What drives me mental about Bob Arum is he is a liar. I've never heard of Akhmadaliev. Come on. The only competitive fight in this division for Inoue is Akhmadaliev. So I'm appealing to Bob Arum, Mr. Honda, Inoue, don't give us a mismatch. I'm sorry. Inoue versus Doheny is a horrendous mismatch. Don't lie to us. And to fight fans, rather than just praising Inoue, who is an amazing fighter, don't take this bullshit. Akhmadaliev has got a better chance than anybody, and he'll give you a great fight."
That bit of it I agree with. MJ would give Inoue a better fight, I think. A much better fight than TJ Doheny and than Sam Goodman, but I think this is about scheduling more than anything else.
Inoue has never been a risk-averse fighter, and I don't think MJ poses such a great challenge that it's the risks he's looking to avoid. Put simply, they entered into one set of negotiations, and they don't want to go back now.
That's it.
But don't tell Eddie Hearn that. Eddie Hearn says, "You are afraid. because you know deep down it's a real fight, and it's the only real fight left for him at 122. You're pound for pound 1, or number 2. You are an incredible fighter. Give them great fights in Tokyo. Fight Akhmadaliev. Otherwise, you are ducking. It's bad optics. And I read an article about 2 or 3 days ago where Mr. Naoya Inoue's handler in Japan was talking about parting ways with the WBA title. That if push comes to shove, they'll drop the belt and it'll go to MJ, and MJ can fight somebody else for it because they have a schedule and they're sticking to it.
They have a plan.
A 2-fight plan for what remains of this year. Then they mean to move up to featherweight, which we just talked about. You see, it's hard for me to imagine that Inoue is so scared, so afraid of little old MJ Akhmadaliev, who got beat by Marlon Tapales.
Right.
But this is the same Inoue who's charting a course to the land of the Giants. The Giants, as far as a super bantamweight is concerned. He's planning on going up to 126. Going up to 126 is a heck of a lot riskier than fighting MJ Akhmadaliev, but that's what they mean to do. So you'll excuse me for saying so. I don't think Inoue or his team are afraid of MJ. It's just that MJ's not a priority to them. They know they're not going to stay at this weight much longer.
2 more fights and that's it.
TJ, Sam Goodman, no fuss, no muss, no friction.
Then they move up to 126.
No, I don't even think they should. I think they should stick around there a while longer. Have that MJ Akhmadaliev fight after the Sam Goodman fight. Have that fight next year and see if you can't bring up Junto.
Junto Nakatani, a 3-division champion, Inoue's countryman, current reigning WBC champion at 118. By next year, see if you don't fight him.
Pardon me for saying so, but the rewards are not so great, and the fight's not so big in value, marquee value, at 126, that Inoue should end his super bantamweight campaign so abruptly.
He should stay at 122. The guys at 126, they should get Turkey Al-Sheikh to do a tournament between them.
My ideal scenario, if I had it my way, Inoue doesn't go up to 126 yet. Not next year.
He stays at 122. The guys at 126, you do a tournament between them so that an undisputed champion emerges. And then once one does, let Inoue fight him.
Because you know what I see? I see a division with 4 separate world champions standing apart from each other, waiting on one guy, just one guy, a little guy, to move up in weight, while they form a line, single file, thinking they're all going to get a crack at the apple while avoiding each other. And I don't like that.
You already saw that at 168 when Canelo got there.
I think that's what we're seeing now at 126. If I had it my way, not only does Inoue stay at 122, he fights MJ next year, and let those guys at 126 settle up with each other before they worry about him.
That's how I would do it.
The way they're doing it, Inoue's only got 2 more fights at 122, then he's moving up. That's why he doesn't care about the MJ fight. And finally, in men's super lightweight news, earlier today it was announced that Jack Catterall, on the heels of his big win over his rival Josh Taylor, will be taking on former champion Regis Prograis. Caught me by surprise because I didn't know that they were talking. The most that we had heard in terms of Jack's next fight was a potential fight with Arnold Barboza, and Arnold looks like he negotiated his ass out of that fight. Do you remember what he was saying? That he's the unbeaten guy and he's the number 1 ranked fighter, that he's the A-side to Jack Catterall, having no signature wins coming off a dubious decision over Sean McComb.
If I had a nickel for every time a fighter overplayed his hand.
So now he's out and Regis Prograis is in. Arnold Barboza's loss has turned out to be Regis Prograis' gain. Regis Prograis,
35 years old to Jack Catterall, who's 31. Regis is about 4 years older than Jack Catterall, sporting a professional record of 29 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 24 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 31 professional bouts.
For me and my money, still one of the strongest punchers, one of the more devastating punchers at this weight, so long as he can deliver his power. In his last fight with Devin Haney, he wasn't able to, because stylistically, that was a bad style matchup for Regis.
This might be too.
The Jack Catterall fight. Jack Catterall, who sports a professional record of 29 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 13 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 30 professional bouts.
He's a jabber, like Haney's a jabber. He's a thinker.
For a counterpuncher like Regis Prograis, who relies on landing a big counter, it doesn't help if the guy's going to stay behind his jab all night, being economic and being cautious. It doesn't help him at all.
Jack is nowhere near as big a puncher as Regis Prograis. He isn't.
Remember that this is the guy that took former champion Jorge Linares the distance in October of last year, and I have nothing against Jorge, but he's a chinny guy. He always has been. Jack couldn't knock him out. He beat him, but he couldn't knock him out.
Jack saw action 2 times last year, and he's already seen action once this year, in May against Josh Taylor.
Avenging that dubious decision loss well over a year ago.
Over a year later, he's on a 3-fight winning streak.
And pairing up with Matchroom as his official promoter has worked out well for him, because now he's on a steady schedule of fights, he's on a winning streak, and he's riding high, compared to Regis, who's coming right off that loss to Devin Haney in December of last year. What are Regis's chances in this fight? What does he have to do? And what he has to do is, instead of looking for countering opportunities,
you have to go out there and create them, because Jack isn't going to take chances with you or your power.
He's not a guy that throws 3 and 4 punches at a time so you can catch him in between the punches. He's going to jab at you. He's going to jab your head off. In what is this battle of the southpaws? Jack is a southpaw, and so is Regis.
Regis is a much bigger puncher. Even now at 35 years old, I do think he packs a big enough wallop that if he can land, he can hurt Jack. I think Regis can hurt just about anybody at this weight, but it's delivering that power.
That's the problem. He couldn't do that in his last fight with Devin Haney, and he couldn't do that before that in his fight with Danielito Zorrilla. So here and now with Jack Catterall, who's economic and a jabber and a thinker and a mover.
At 35 going on 36 years old, has Regis learned from those mistakes? Has he patched up those holes? Is he actually better? Better enough?
This is going down in Manchester. Jack Catterall's got home field advantage, more or less.
You're not winning a decision over there. If the fight is competitive, you're not going to get the nod.
So if you're going over there and you're upset-minded, you don't give the judges the chance to score it. You take it out of their hands and you knock him out.
Do it!
Can Regis do it? There's only one way to find out.
And we will in August.